You're walking down a busy street when you see someone collapsed on the sidewalk. Most people would call for help, maybe wait for paramedics, then continue with their day. But what if that single moment of kindness led to you inheriting $1 million hotel empire? What if helping a stranger home became the decision that transformed your entire life forever? This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't fiction. This is the remarkable true story of Maria Santos, a struggling waitress who made one simple choice that seemed insignificant at the time. She helped an elderly man who had fallen outside her apartment building. She had no idea that this man was hiding a secret that would make her one of the wealthiest women in the city. Some people call it destiny. Others call it incredible luck. But Maria's story proves that sometimes the universe has a way of rewarding those who show genuine kindness when no one is watching. Her journey from barely making rent to owning a luxury hotel chain will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, fortune, and the power of simple human compassion. Get ready to discover how one woman's act of kindness unlocked doors she never knew existed, and how helping someone home became the key to her own extraordinary destination. Maria Santos had always believed that life was about small moments that somehow connected to create something bigger. She just never imagined how literally true that would become. On a cold Tuesday evening in downtown Chicago, she was walking home from her double shift at Romano's Diner, her feet aching in worn-out shoes, and her mind focused on nothing more than getting to her tiny studio apartment. The November wind cut through her thin jacket as she hurried down Michigan Avenue. At 28, Maria had been working 2 jobs for 3 years, trying to save enough money to maybe take some business classes at the community college. Her dream was modest, but felt impossibly far away. She made just enough to cover her rent, utilities, and basic groceries, with maybe $20 left over each month if she was lucky. That evening, as she turned the corner onto her street, she noticed a small crowd gathered near the entrance of her building. People were standing around, some looking concerned, others just curious. As she got closer, she could see an elderly man sitting on the concrete steps, looking dazed and confused. He appeared to be in his 70s, well-dressed in an expensive-looking coat, but something was clearly wrong. Someone should call an ambulance, a woman was saying. He might have hit his head when he fell. I already called 911, another voice replied. They said it might be 20 minutes. Maria approached the group and knelt down beside the elderly man. He had kind eyes, though they seemed unfocused, and his silver hair was slightly disheveled. There was a small cut on his forehead, but nothing that looked too serious. "Sir, are you okay?" Maria asked gently. "What's your name?" The man looked at her with confusion. I'm not sure where I am," he said slowly. "I was walking, and then I don't remember." One of the neighbors, Mrs. Chun from the second floor, shook her head. "He's been like this for 10 minutes. Keeps saying he doesn't remember where he lives or how he got here." Maria noticed the man was shivering despite his heavy coat. The temperature was dropping, and it looked like it might start snowing soon. She made a decision that would change everything, though she had no way of knowing it at the time. "Sir, would you like to come inside and warm up while we wait for the paramedics?" she offered. "I live right here in this building. You can sit down properly, and I can make you some tea." Several people in the crowd exchanged glances. In a big city like Chicago, inviting a stranger into your home wasn't something most people would consider, especially someone who seemed disoriented and confused. "Maria, are you sure that's wise?" Mrs. Chun asked quietly. "You don't know this man." But something about the elderly gentleman seemed familiar to Maria, though she couldn't place why. Maybe it was the way he reminded her of her grandfather, who had passed away when she was 15. Her grandfather had always taught her that kindness was never wasted, even when it seemed risky. "It's okay," Maria said, helping the man to his feet. "Everyone deserves a warm place to sit when they're not feeling well." The man, though unsteady, was able to walk with Maria's support. She guided him through the building's lobby and up 2 flights of stairs to her small apartment. It wasn't much to look at, a studio with a Murphy bed, a tiny kitchen, and one window that faced the alley, but it was clean and warm. She settled him into her only comfortable chair, a second-hand recliner she'd bought from a thrift store, and immediately put the kettle on for tea. As she bustled around the small space, she kept glancing at her guest, trying to figure out what seemed so familiar about him. "This is very kind of you," the man said, his voice becoming clearer as he warmed up. "I'm sorry to be such trouble. I'm usually not like this." "Don't worry about it," Maria replied, bringing him a steaming mug of chamomile tea. "I'm Maria, by the way. Maria Santos." "Thank you, Maria," he said, accepting the tea gratefully. I'm trying to remember my name. This is so embarrassing." Maria sat down on the edge of her Murphy bed, which doubled as her couch during the day. Sometimes when people have a shock or a fall, their memory can be a bit fuzzy for a while. "The paramedics will be here soon, and they'll make sure you're okay." As they waited, Maria found herself talking to fill the silence. She told him about her work at the diner, about her dreams of maybe opening her own small restaurant someday, about how she'd moved to Chicago from a small town in Illinois 5 years ago. The man listened intently, nodding and asking thoughtful questions that showed his mind was becoming clearer. "You have a good heart," he said after she'd been talking for about 15 minutes. "Not many people would invite a stranger into their home like this. My grandfather always said that we're all just strangers until we become friends," Maria replied with a smile. "Besides, you don't seem dangerous. You seem like someone who's just having a rough evening." Just then, there was a knock at the door. The paramedics had arrived, along with Mrs. Chun, who had directed them upstairs. The medical team was efficient and professional, checking the man's vital signs, examining the cut on his forehead, and asking him a series of questions to assess his mental state. "Your memory seems to be coming back," one of the paramedics observed. "Do you remember your name now?" The man paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes, I think so. It's Henry. Henry Wellington." Maria felt a small shock of recognition at the name, though she couldn't immediately place why it sounded familiar. In Chicago, Wellington was a name associated with old money and established businesses, but she couldn't quite make the connection. "Do you remember where you live, Mr. Wellington?" the paramedic continued. Henry Wellington looked thoughtful. "Yes, I live on Lakeshore Drive. The Wellington Hotel building." Now Maria knew why the name was familiar. The Wellington Hotel was one of Chicago's most prestigious establishments, a luxury hotel that had been operating for over 60 years. She'd walked past it many times on her way to work, always admiring its elegant facade and wondering what it would be like to stay in such a place. The paramedics determined that Mr. Wellington had likely experienced a brief episode of confusion, possibly brought on by low blood sugar combined with the stress of walking in the cold. They recommended he see his regular doctor the next day, but said he was stable enough to go home. "I should call a taxi, mister," Wellington said, reaching for his wallet. But as he opened it, Maria could see it was stuffed with cash and several credit cards that looked like they were made of actual metal. "Actually," Maria said quickly, "I could drive you home. I mean, if you'd feel comfortable with that. I have a car, and it's not that far." Mr. Wellington looked at her with surprise and genuine gratitude. "You've already done so much for me. I couldn't ask you to do more." "You're not asking," Maria said with a smile. "I'm offering. Besides, after what happened tonight, you probably shouldn't be alone in a taxi. What if you get confused again?" The paramedics agreed that having someone accompany Mr. Wellington would be a good idea, at least until he was safely home. So Maria grabbed her keys and coat, and together they made their way down to her old Honda Civic parked on the street. The drive to Lakeshore Drive took about 20 minutes through Chicago's evening traffic. During the ride, Mr. Wellington seemed much more like himself. His confusion had lifted completely, and he began asking Maria more questions about her life and work. "So you work at Romano's Diner," he said. "That's the place on State Street, isn't it? I think I've eaten there once or twice over the years." "Really?" Maria was surprised. Romano's was a decent diner, but it wasn't the kind of place she'd expect someone who lived at the Wellington Hotel to frequent. "Oh yes," Mr. Wellington chuckled. "I like to walk around the city and try different restaurants. Some of the best meals I've ever had have been in small, unpretentious places. There's something authentic about them that you can't get in fancy establishments." As they pulled up to the Wellington Hotel, Maria was struck by how magnificent it looked, even in the evening darkness. The building was 12 stories of classic architecture, with elegant stonework and large windows that glowed warmly from within. A doorman in a crisp uniform stood at the entrance, and she could see through the glass doors into a lobby that looked like something from a movie. "This is beautiful," Maria said, feeling a bit intimidated. "It is," Mr. Wellington agreed, but his tone was thoughtful rather than boastful. "Though sometimes beautiful places can feel quite lonely." The doorman, a middle-aged man named Charles, hurried over to the car as soon as he saw Mr. Wellington getting out. "Mr. Wellington, we were worried about you. You left for your walk hours ago, and when you didn't return." "I'm fine, Charles," Mr. Wellington assured him. "I had a little episode, but this kind young woman took care of me." He turned to Maria. "Charles, I'd like you to meet Maria Santos. She quite literally saved my evening." Maria felt embarrassed by the praise. "I just made you some tea and gave you a ride home. Anyone would have done the same thing." "No," Mr. Wellington said firmly. "Not anyone would have done the same thing. Trust me on that." Charles shook Maria's hand warmly. "Thank you, miss. Mr. Wellington means a great deal to all of us here." As Maria prepared to leave, Mr. Wellington stopped her. "Maria, I wonder, would you be free for lunch tomorrow? I'd like to properly thank you for your kindness, and I'd very much like to continue our conversation." Maria was touched, but also a bit uncertain. She'd helped Mr. Wellington because it was the right thing to do, not because she expected anything in return. "That's very kind of you, but you don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay." "Please," Mr. Wellington said earnestly. "It will mean a great deal to me. Shall we say noon? Right here at the hotel restaurant?" Looking at his hopeful expression, Maria found herself nodding. "Okay, that sounds nice. Thank you." As she drove home that night, Maria couldn't stop thinking about the strange turn her evening had taken. She'd left work expecting nothing more than another quiet night in her small apartment. But instead, she'd ended up helping a stranger who turned out to live in one of Chicago's most exclusive hotels. The whole experience felt surreal, like something that happened to other people, not to her. What she couldn't have known was that Henry Wellington had spent the entire drive home thinking about her as well. In his 73 years, he'd met countless people, but he'd rarely encountered someone who showed such genuine kindness without expecting anything in return. Most people who were nice to him, he'd learned over the years, wanted something from him. But Maria had helped him simply because he needed help. That night, as Maria fell asleep in her Murphy bed, she had no idea that her simple act of compassion had set in motion a series of events that would transform her life in ways she could never have imagined. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the most ordinary moments, and sometimes helping someone home is just the beginning of finding your own way to an entirely new destination. The next morning, Maria woke up wondering if the previous evening had been some kind of strange dream. But the business card Mr. Wellington had pressed into her hand as she left, embossed with the Wellington Hotel logo, proved that it had all been very real indeed. Maria stared at herself in the small mirror above her bathroom sink, wondering what exactly one wore to lunch at the Wellington Hotel. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of her diner uniforms, a few casual outfits for her days off, and one black dress she'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. She settled on a simple navy blue blouse and her best pair of jeans, hoping she wouldn't look completely out of place in such an elegant establishment. The morning had dragged by slowly. Maria had called in sick to her day's shift at Romano's, the first time she'd done so in over a year, telling herself that lunch with Mr. Wellington was important enough to warrant losing a day's wages. Still, the practical part of her mind kept calculating how much money she was giving up and whether this lunch would somehow be worth it. At 11:45, she stood outside the Wellington Hotel, feeling intimidated by its grandeur in the daylight. The building looked even more impressive than it had the night before. The limestone facade was pristine, the brass fixtures gleamed, and every window sparkled in the autumn sun. She watched well-dressed people walking in and out of the revolving doors and wondered if she'd made a mistake coming here. Miss Santos, Charles the doorman called out, recognizing her immediately. Mr. Wellington is expecting you. Right this way. He ushered her through the lobby with the kind of attention usually reserved for VIP guests. The interior was even more beautiful than Maria had glimpsed through the glass doors the night before. The ceiling was high and decorated with intricate plasterwork. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, and fresh flower arrangements filled the space with subtle fragrance. The Wellington room is just through here, Charles said, guiding her toward an elegant restaurant off the main lobby. Mr. Wellington requested a quiet table where you two could talk. As they entered the restaurant, Maria's breath caught. The dining room was sophisticated yet welcoming, with cream-colored walls, rich wood paneling, and large windows that offered views of Lake Michigan. Only about half the tables were occupied, mostly by business people having working lunches and a few well-dressed couples enjoying leisurely meals. Mr. Wellington stood up as soon as he saw her approaching. He looked completely different from the confused, disheveled man she'd helped the night before. Today he was impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and his eyes bright and alert. But his warm smile was exactly the same. "Maria, I'm so glad you came," he said, pulling out her chair before the waiter could reach it. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Maria replied, still feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the elegance of her surroundings. "This place is incredible." "It is rather nice, isn't it?" Mr. Wellington said, settling back into his own chair. "Though I have to admit, after 43 years, I sometimes take it for granted." Maria looked at him with surprise. 43 years? You've been living here that long?" Mr. Wellington chuckled. "Oh, I don't just live here, my dear. I own the Wellington Hotel. Have since 1983. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She'd helped the owner of one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels get home the night before, and now she was having lunch with him in his own restaurant. Suddenly, her navy blouse and jeans felt even more inadequate. "I can see I've surprised you," Mr. Wellington observed kindly. "I probably should have mentioned it last night, but honestly, it was refreshing to meet someone who was kind to me just because I needed help, not because of who I am or what I own." A waiter appeared at their table, offering menus and water. Maria glanced at the prices and felt her heart sink. The least expensive entree cost more than she usually spent on groceries in a week. "Please, order whatever you'd like," Mr. Wellington said, noticing her hesitation. "This is my treat, and I insist you try something special. The chef here is exceptional." Despite his reassurance, Maria chose one of the more modestly priced items, a chicken salad that still cost $32. Mr. Wellington ordered the same thing, claiming it was one of his favorites, though Maria suspected he was just trying to make her feel more comfortable. "Now then," he said after the waiter had taken their orders, "tell me more about yourself, Maria. Last night, you mentioned wanting to go to business school. What kind of business interests you?" Maria found herself opening up in a way she rarely did with strangers. There was something about Mr. Wellington's genuine interest and kind manner that made conversation feel natural. She told him about her dream of someday opening a small restaurant, maybe something that served comfort food, made with care and attention. "I know it sounds silly," she said, playing with her napkin. "I mean, here I'm having lunch in this beautiful place, talking about wanting to open some little diner somewhere." "It doesn't sound silly at all," Mr. Wellington said firmly. "Some of my happiest memories involve small restaurants where the owner cared about every detail, where the food was made with love rather than just for profit. There's real value in that." Their conversation flowed easily from topic to topic. Mr. Wellington asked about her family. She told him about her parents who still lived in the small town where she'd grown up, about her younger brother who was studying to be a teacher. In return, he shared stories about the hotel business, about changes he'd seen in Chicago over the decades, about the satisfaction of creating a place where people could feel welcomed and cared for. "You know," he said as they finished their meal, "running a hotel is really just hospitality on a large scale. It's about making people feel at home when they're away from home. The same impulse that made you invite me into your apartment last night. That's what good hospitality is all about." As they talked, Maria began to understand that despite his wealth and success, Mr. Wellington was genuinely lonely. He mentioned that he'd never married, that he had no children, and that most of his social interactions revolved around business. His eyes lit up when he talked about the hotel staff, many of whom had worked for him for years, but there was a wistfulness in his voice that suggested he longed for more personal connections. "Maria," he said as they finished their coffee, "I have a proposition for you." "No, that sounds too formal. Let me ask you something. Would you be interested in learning about the hotel business? I mean, really learning it from the ground up?" Maria looked at him with confusion. "I'm not sure I understand." "Well," Mr. Wellington continued, "I've been thinking about what you said about wanting to go to business school and eventually open your own restaurant. What if I could offer you something better than business school? What if you could learn by doing, right here at the Wellington?" Maria's heart began to race. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting I hire you," Mr. Wellington said simply. "Start you in an entry-level position, maybe in our restaurant or guest services, and then rotate you through different departments so you can learn how everything works. You'd earn a good salary, much better than what you're making at the diner, and you'd get a real education in hospitality and business management." Maria stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. "But why? I mean, you barely know me." "I know enough," Mr. Wellington replied. "I know you're kind, responsible, and genuinely caring. I know you work hard. 2 jobs at your age shows character. And I know you have dreams and ambition. Those are exactly the qualities I look for in people I want to work with." Maria felt tears threatening to form in her eyes. This opportunity was beyond anything she'd ever imagined possible. But she was also practical enough to be cautious. "This is incredibly generous," she said carefully, "but I need to ask, what would you expect from me in return? I mean, besides good work." Mr. Wellington smiled, and Maria could see that her question pleased him. "Smart to ask. All I expect is that you work hard, learn everything you can, and be honest with me always. I'm not offering this because I expect anything beyond that, Maria. I'm offering it because I believe you have potential, and because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because yesterday evening, you reminded me what genuine kindness looks like. In my position, I don't encounter that very often." They spent another hour discussing the details. The starting salary Mr. Wellington proposed was almost double what Maria was making at both her jobs combined. He offered to let her start the following Monday, giving her time to give proper notice at Romano's. The position would include health benefits, paid vacation, and opportunities for advancement based on performance. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Mr. Wellington handed her a business card with his direct phone number. "Think it over this weekend," he said. "If you decide you're interested, call me Sunday evening, and we'll make all the arrangements." Walking home that afternoon, Maria felt like she was floating. The practical part of her mind kept insisting that things like this didn't happen to people like her. But another part of her, the part that had inherited her grandfather's faith in kindness and possibility, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to build the life she'd always dreamed of. That evening, she called her parents to tell them about the incredible offer. Her mother was thrilled, but cautious, reminding Maria to read any contract carefully. Her father was more direct in his enthusiasm. "Mija," he said, using the Spanish endearment from her childhood, "sometimes life gives us gifts we didn't know we needed. This man sees something special in you. Don't let fear talk you out of believing in yourself." Maria spent the weekend thinking about Mr. Wellington's offer from every possible angle. She researched the Wellington Hotel online and learned that it was indeed one of Chicago's most respected establishments, consistently rated among the top hotels in the city. She read about Mr. Wellington himself and discovered that he was known not just for his business success, but for his philanthropy and fair treatment of employees. By Sunday evening, she knew what her answer would be. When she called Mr. Wellington, her voice was steady and confident. "I'd like to accept your offer," she said. "I'm ready to learn, and I promise I won't let you down." "I never thought you would," Mr. Wellington replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Welcome to the Wellington family, Maria. I have a feeling this is going to be the beginning of something wonderful for both of us." As Maria hung up the phone that night, she looked around her tiny studio apartment and tried to imagine what her life might look like a year from now. She couldn't have predicted then that she was embarking on a journey that would lead her far beyond anything she could envision. All she knew was that she'd taken the first step toward a future that felt full of possibility, and that it had all started with a simple decision to help a stranger who needed assistance getting home. The next morning, Maria walked into Romano's diner to give her 2 weeks' notice, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected turn her life was taking. She had no idea that this was still just the beginning of a story that would ultimately transform not just her own life, but the lives of many others as well. Maria's first day at the Wellington Hotel was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She arrived at 7 in the morning, wearing her one professional outfit and carrying a small notebook she'd bought specifically to record everything she learned. Mr. Wellington met her in the lobby, looking perfectly at ease in his element, and introduced her to Jennifer Morrison, the hotel's general manager. Jennifer was a woman in her early 40s with short auburn hair and an air of competent authority. She looked Maria up and down with the assessing gaze of someone used to evaluating new employees quickly. "So you're the young woman who helped Henry home the other night," Jennifer said with a slight smile. "He's been talking about you all week. I hope you're prepared to work hard, because Henry doesn't give opportunities like this lightly." "I'm ready to learn whatever you can teach me," Maria replied, meaning every word. "Good. We'll start you in guest services, working the front desk. It's the heart of hotel operations, and you'll interact with every other department. Sarah Chun will be your trainer." Sarah Chun turned out to be a woman about Maria's age who had been working at the Wellington for 4 years. She was efficient, friendly, and had an encyclopedic knowledge of everything from room types to restaurant reservations to the preferences of regular guests. "The most important thing to remember," Sarah explained as she walked Maria through the computer system, "is that every guest is someone's most important person. The businessman who's here for one night deserves the same attention as the family celebrating their anniversary. Mr. Wellington always says that hospitality is about making people feel like they matter." Maria absorbed everything like a sponge. She learned about the different room categories, from standard doubles to the penthouse suite that cost more per night than she used to make in 2 months. She studied the hotel services, from the business center to the concierge to the spa on the 10th floor. Most importantly, she watched how the experienced staff interacted with guests, noting the subtle ways they anticipated needs and solved problems. Her first week was exhausting, but exhilarating. She worked alongside Sarah during the day's shift, handling check-ins and check-outs, making reservations, and fielding the hundreds of questions that guests asked every day. Everything from "where's the nearest pharmacy" to "can you recommend a romantic restaurant" became opportunities for Maria to learn about Chicago and the hospitality business. Mr. Wellington stopped by the front desk several times each day, always taking a moment to ask how Maria was doing. But she noticed he was careful not to show her any obvious favoritism in front of the other staff. She appreciated this restraint, understanding instinctively that earning her colleagues' respect would be crucial to her success. After 2 weeks at the front desk, Jennifer moved Maria to the restaurant, where she worked with the dining room manager, Antoine Dubois. Antoine was a thin, elegant man in his 50s who had worked in fine dining establishments around the world before joining the Wellington 5 years earlier. "Service is an art form," Antoine explained on Maria's first day in the restaurant. "It requires timing, attention to detail, and the ability to read people. Watch our guests carefully. The couple at table 6 has been married for 30 years. See how they barely speak? They need quiet, attentive service. But the family at table 12 is celebrating something. They want to feel our excitement, too." Working in the restaurant taught Maria about a different aspect of hospitality. She learned about wine pairings, food presentation, and the intricate choreography required to serve multiple tables simultaneously. More importantly, she began to understand how the restaurant connected to the hotel's overall reputation and success. "Food is emotional," Antoine told her one afternoon as they prepared for the dinner service. People remember how a meal made them feel long after they've forgotten what they ate. Our job is to create moments that matter. Maria found herself thinking about Antoine's words often. They reminded her of her own dreams of opening a restaurant, but now those dreams were becoming more sophisticated. She began to see how food service was part of a larger picture of creating experiences for people. After a month in the restaurant, Jennifer moved Maria to housekeeping, where she worked with Rosa Martinez, the executive housekeeper. Rosa had been with the Wellington for 15 years and ran her department with military precision. People think housekeeping is just about cleaning, Rosa explained as she showed Maria through the laundry facilities. But it's really about creating a sanctuary. When someone walks into their room, they should feel like they're entering a space that was prepared especially for them. Working with Rosa's team gave Maria a new appreciation for the enormous effort required to maintain the hotel's standards. She learned about thread counts and turn-down service, about the specific way towels should be folded and how flowers should be arranged. She also gained respect for the housekeeping staff, who worked tirelessly to ensure that every room met the Wellington's exacting standards. "This work is invisible when it's done right," Rosa told her. "But if we make a mistake, everyone notices. There's honor in doing work that others depend on, even if they don't always appreciate it." As the weeks turned into months, Maria rotated through different departments, learning about maintenance, event planning, guest services, and hotel administration. Each rotation taught her something new, not just about hotel operations, but about business in general. In maintenance, she learned about the enormous infrastructure required to keep a building like the Wellington running smoothly. In events, she discovered how much coordination was needed to execute a single wedding or corporate function. In administration, she began to understand the financial complexities of running a hospitality business. Throughout her training, Mr. Wellington remained supportive but not intrusive. They had lunch together once a week, usually in his private office on the 12th floor, where he would ask about what she was learning and share insights from his own experience. "The hotel business teaches you about human nature," he told her during one of these lunches. "People are at their most vulnerable when they're away from home. They're tired from traveling, they're in unfamiliar surroundings, and they're often dealing with stress or special occasions. How we treat them in those moments says everything about who we are." Maria found herself looking forward to these weekly lunches more than she'd expected. Mr. Wellington had become not just her employer, but something like a mentor and friend. He encouraged her questions, challenged her thinking, and gradually began involving her in higher-level discussions about hotel operations. "I've been thinking about expanding our restaurant operation," he mentioned during one lunch in her 4th month at the hotel. "Maybe adding a more casual dining option, something that would appeal to both hotel guests and neighborhood residents. What do you think?" Maria was surprised that he was asking for her opinion on such an important decision, but she'd learned enough by now to offer thoughtful insights. "I think it could work," she said carefully, "but it would need to feel authentic to what the Wellington represents. Maybe something that showcases local ingredients and has a connection to Chicago's food culture." Mr. Wellington nodded approvingly. "Exactly what I was thinking. In fact, I was wondering if you might be interested in helping develop the concept. It could be a good project for you as you continue learning about the business." Maria felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nervousness. The opportunity to help create something new at the Wellington was beyond anything she'd imagined when she first started working there. As spring arrived in Chicago, Maria realized that her life had transformed completely in just a few months. She'd moved into a much nicer apartment, had health insurance for the first time in years, and was learning skills she never could have acquired elsewhere. But more than the material improvements, she felt like she was becoming the person she'd always wanted to be. Her relationship with Mr. Wellington continued to deepen as well. She'd learned that he was indeed lonely, despite his success and the respect of his staff. He had no family to speak of, and his social circle consisted mainly of business associates and acquaintances. Maria began to understand that their friendship meant as much to him as his mentorship meant to her. One evening in late April, as they were reviewing plans for the new restaurant concept, Mr. Wellington made an observation that surprised Maria. "You know, my dear, these past few months have been some of the most enjoyable I've had in years. Having someone to share ideas with, to teach and learn from, it's reminded me why I fell in love with this business in the first place." Maria looked at him with affection and gratitude. "I feel the same way. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be here, doing this work, I never would have believed it." "Life has a way of surprising you, Mr. Wellington replied. "Sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected beginnings." As summer approached, Maria had been with the Wellington for nearly 6 months. She'd completed rotations through all the major departments and had begun taking on more responsibilities. Jennifer Morrison had started including her in management meetings, and other department heads sought out her input on various projects. But Maria had no idea that the biggest surprise of her life was still to come. Mr. Wellington had been making plans of his own, plans that would soon transform not just Maria's role at the hotel, but her entire future. The kindness she'd shown to a confused elderly man on a cold November evening was about to pay dividends beyond anything she could have imagined. The first hint that something significant was brewing came during their weekly lunch in early May. Mr. Wellington seemed different somehow, more contemplative than usual, and occasionally lost in thought during their conversation. "Maria," he said as they finished their meal, "there's something I need to discuss with you soon. Not today, but in the next week or two. It's about your future here at the Wellington and some decisions I've been making about the hotel's long-term direction." Maria felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with curiosity. Mr. Wellington's tone was serious, but not concerning, more like someone who was preparing to share important news. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Everything is more than okay," he assured her with a smile. "In fact, I think you're going to be very pleased with what I have to tell you. But I want to make sure all the details are properly arranged first." As Maria left his office that day, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change again in ways she couldn't predict. She'd learned to trust Mr. Wellington's judgment completely, but she also knew him well enough by now to recognize when he was planning something significant. What she didn't know was that Mr. Wellington had spent months consulting with lawyers, financial advisors, and his longtime friend Jennifer Morrison about a decision that would make Maria not just his employee, but his heir. The story that had begun with a simple act of kindness was about to reach a turning point that neither of them could have foreseen, but that both of them were ready for in their own ways. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late May, just as Maria was reviewing the weekly occupancy reports in her small office on the 11th floor. She'd been promoted to Assistant Guest Services Manager the month before, a position that had been created specifically for her as she continued learning the business. "Maria, could you come up to my office, please?" Mr. Wellington's voice sounded different over the phone, more formal than usual, almost nervous. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, my dear. There are just some people I'd like you to meet, and something important we need to discuss." Maria found herself feeling anxious as she rode the elevator to the 12th floor. In the 8 months she'd been working at the Wellington, she'd never heard Mr. Wellington sound quite so serious. She wondered if perhaps the hotel was being sold, or if there were financial problems she didn't know about. When she entered Mr. Wellington's office, she was surprised to find 3 people she didn't recognize sitting at the conference table. Mr. Wellington stood as she entered, his usual warm smile in place, but she could sense an underlying tension in his manner. "Maria, I'd like you to meet some friends of mine," he said, gesturing to the visitors. "This is Robert Hawthorne, my attorney for the past 25 years. This is Sarah Chun, not our Sarah, but Sarah Chun Williams, my financial advisor. And this is Dr. Michael Torres, who has been my personal physician for over a decade." Maria shook hands with each of them, feeling increasingly confused about why such an august group would be assembled to meet with her. Mr. Wellington gestured for everyone to sit down, and Maria noticed that a thick folder of documents sat on the table in front of his chair. "Maria, Mr. Wellington began, his voice gentle but serious. What I'm about to tell you is going to come as a shock, and I want you to know that there's absolutely no pressure for you to respond in any particular way. I've asked these people here as witnesses and to help explain some complicated legal and financial matters. Maria's heart began to race. Mr. Wellington, you're making me nervous. Whatever this is about, just tell me straight out. Mr. Wellington smiled at her directness. It was one of the qualities he'd always appreciated about her. Very well. Maria, I'm 74 years old, and while I'm in good health, I'm not getting any younger. I've spent the past several months making arrangements for the future of the Wellington Hotel, and I've decided that I want you to inherit the business when I pass away. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She stared at Mr. Wellington, certain she must have misunderstood what he'd said. I'm sorry, what did you just say? I said I want to leave the Wellington Hotel to you, Mr. Wellington repeated gently. All of it. The building, the business, everything. Maria felt the room spinning around her. She gripped the arms of her chair and tried to process what she was hearing. But that's impossible. We've only known each other for 8 months. I'm nobody special. I helped you home one night. And in doing so, you changed my life, Mr. Wellington said simply. Maria, I've had nearly 45 years to observe human nature in this business. I've met thousands of people, worked with hundreds of employees, and done business with more individuals than I can count. Very few of them have shown me the kind of genuine kindness you demonstrated that night, with no expectation of anything in return. Robert Hawthorne, the attorney, leaned forward. Miss Santos, I know this is overwhelming, but Mr. Wellington has been very thorough in his planning. The will has been drafted and reviewed multiple times. The succession plan is legally sound and financially responsible. I don't understand, Maria said, looking around the table. Why me? Surely you have family or longtime employees who would be more appropriate. I have no family, Mr. Wellington said quietly. My parents died years ago. I never married, and I have no children. As for employees, while I respect and care for many of them, none have demonstrated the combination of character, intelligence, and genuine caring that you have. More importantly, none of them have shown the kind of natural aptitude for this business that you've displayed. Dr. Torres spoke up for the first time. Miss Santos, I want to assure you that Mr. Wellington is in excellent mental health. I've known him for many years, and this decision reflects his usual thoughtfulness and good judgment, not any kind of impairment or confusion. Sarah Chun Williams nodded in agreement. From a financial perspective, Mr. Wellington's estate planning makes complete sense. The hotel is profitable and well managed. With proper guidance during the transition period, there's every reason to believe it will continue to thrive under new ownership. Maria looked at Mr. Wellington, searching his face for some sign that this was an elaborate joke or test. But his expression was completely serious and filled with an affection that made her eyes fill with tears. Henry, she said, using his first name for the first time ever, I can't accept this. It's too much. It wouldn't be right. Maria, he replied, I've thought about this decision for months. I've consulted with advisors, reviewed every possible alternative, and considered all the implications. This isn't a whim or a moment of sentimentality. It's the most carefully considered decision I've ever made. He reached for the folder of documents and opened it. Let me explain how this would work. First, nothing changes immediately. I'm planning to continue running the hotel for several more years, health permitting. During that time, you would gradually take on more responsibilities and learn the aspects of the business you haven't been exposed to yet, things like financial management, property development, and strategic planning. Robert Hawthorne picked up the explanation. The transition would be gradual and carefully managed. Ms. Santos would be given increasingly important roles in the company, with Mr. Wellington serving as her mentor and guide. When the time comes for full ownership to transfer, whether due to Mr. Wellington's retirement or passing, she'll be fully prepared to take over. But what about the money? Maria asked practically. I assume there are enormous tax implications and legal complexities I couldn't possibly handle. Sarah Chun Williams smiled. That's where proper planning comes in. Mr. Wellington's estate has been structured to minimize tax burdens while ensuring a smooth transition. There are trusts, insurance policies, and other financial instruments in place to handle the practical aspects. You wouldn't be thrown into deep water without support. Mr. Wellington reached across the table and took Maria's hand. My dear, I know this is overwhelming. I'm not asking you to decide today or even this month. Take all the time you need to think about it. But I want you to know that this decision comes from a place of complete confidence in your abilities and character. Maria felt tears streaming down her cheeks. The magnitude of what was being offered to her was beyond anything she could have imagined in her wildest dreams. But even more overwhelming than the financial implications was the depth of trust and affection that Mr. Wellington was demonstrating. Why didn't you tell me you were thinking about this? She asked through her tears. Because I wanted you to continue learning and growing naturally without the pressure of knowing what was at stake, Mr. Wellington replied. I wanted to be sure my assessment of your character and abilities was correct. And I'm happy to say that these 8 months have confirmed everything I believed about you that first night. The meeting continued for another hour, with the advisors explaining various aspects of the succession plan and answering Maria's questions. The more she learned, the more she realized how thoroughly Mr. Wellington had thought through every detail. This wasn't an impulsive gesture, but a carefully crafted plan based on months of observation and consideration. As the meeting concluded, Robert Hawthorne handed Maria a copy of the relevant documents. Take these home and review them at your leisure, he said. If you have questions, don't hesitate to call me. And remember, accepting this inheritance means accepting significant responsibilities, but it also means continuing the legacy of one of Chicago's most respected hotels. After the advisors left, Maria and Mr. Wellington sat alone in his office, both of them emotionally drained by the morning's revelations. I need you to know something, Maria said finally. That night when I helped you home, I wasn't thinking about what I might get in return. I was just trying to do the right thing. I know that, Mr. Wellington replied. That's exactly why I'm doing this. Maria, in my 74 years, I've learned that character is the rarest and most valuable quality a person can possess. You have it in abundance. Everything else can be taught, but genuine goodness, that's something you're born with. That evening, Maria sat in her apartment, the legal documents spread out on her small dining table, trying to comprehend the transformation that was being offered to her. 1 year ago, she'd been struggling to make ends meet on a waitress's salary. Now she was being offered ownership of a multi-million-dollar hotel. She called her parents that night, tried to explain the incredible turn her life was taking. Her mother cried when she heard the news, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity. Her father was more philosophical. Mija, remember what I told you when you first got the job at the hotel? Sometimes life gives us gifts we didn't know we needed. This man sees your heart, and he wants to reward it. Don't let fear or feelings of unworthiness prevent you from accepting a blessing. Over the following weeks, Maria found herself looking at the Wellington Hotel with entirely new eyes. Every aspect of the operation took on different significance when she considered that she might someday be responsible for all of it. The weight of potential ownership was both exhilarating and terrifying. She began studying the hotel industry more seriously, reading trade publications, and researching other successful hospitality businesses. She also started paying closer attention to the financial aspects of the Wellington's operations, learning about profit margins, seasonal fluctuations, and the countless factors that contributed to the hotel's success. Most importantly, she continued learning from Mr. Wellington himself. Their weekly lunches became intensive educational sessions where he shared 45 years of experience and wisdom. He told her about challenges he'd faced, mistakes he'd learned from, and the principles that had guided his business decisions. The hotel business is ultimately about people, he reminded her during one of these sessions. Yes, you need to understand finance and operations and marketing. But at the end of the day, success comes from taking care of people, your guests, your employees, and your community. If you remember that, everything else will follow. As summer progressed, Maria found her confidence growing. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could handle the responsibility that Mr. Wellington was offering her. The scared young woman who had once worried about making rent was evolving into someone who could envision herself running a major hospitality business. But she also understood that accepting Mr. Wellington's offer meant accepting a responsibility that went far beyond her own future. The Wellington Hotel employed over 200 people, served thousands of guests each year, and was an important part of Chicago's hospitality industry. If she said yes to this incredible opportunity, she would be saying yes to becoming a steward of something much larger than herself. The decision would shape not just her own destiny, but the destinies of everyone connected to the Wellington Hotel. As Maria contemplated this awesome responsibility, she began to understand that the story that had started with a simple act of kindness was evolving into something that would define the rest of her life. 3 years had passed since that life-changing meeting in Mr. Wellington's office, and Maria Santos, now Maria Santos Wellington, having legally added a surname to honor their unique relationship, stood at the window of what had once been Henry's office, looking out over Lake Michigan. The office was hers now, though she still sometimes felt like she was borrowing it from someone who might return at any moment. Henry Wellington had passed away peacefully in his sleep 6 months earlier, at the age of 77. True to his word, he had spent those final 3 years preparing Maria for ownership, gradually transferring more responsibilities to her while remaining available for guidance and support. His death, though not unexpected given his age, had left Maria with a profound sense of loss that went far beyond the professional realm. "He was like a father to you," Jennifer Morrison had said at the funeral, and Maria had realized how true that was. The elderly man she'd helped home on a cold November night had become the most important person in her life, a mentor, friend, and family all rolled into one. Now, at 31, Maria owned and operated the Wellington Hotel, along with 2 additional properties that Henry had acquired and placed in her name during his final years. The Wellington Chicago remained the flagship, but there was also the Wellington Milwaukee, a boutique hotel they had developed together, and the Wellington Evanston, a conference center and hotel near Northwestern University. The transformation in Maria's life was so complete that sometimes she had to remind herself it was real. She lived now in the penthouse suite atop the Wellington Chicago, a space that Henry had renovated specifically for her. She drove a BMW instead of a Honda Civic, wore designer clothes instead of thrift store finds, and had a bank account that would have seemed impossible to her former self. But the most significant changes weren't material. Maria had discovered that she had a natural talent for the hospitality business, an intuitive understanding of what made people feel welcomed and valued. Under her leadership, the Wellington hotels had not only maintained their reputation for excellence, but had expanded it. The Wellington Chicago now boasted a 5-star rating from every major travel publication and had been named Chicago's best hotel 3 years running. The restaurant that Maria and Henry had developed together, Campo, featuring locally sourced ingredients and a menu that celebrated Midwest cuisine, had become one of the city's most popular dining destinations. More importantly, Maria had implemented changes throughout the organization that reflected her values and vision. She had increased wages for all hourly employees, established a comprehensive benefits package that included tuition assistance for workers wanting to further their education, and created a profit-sharing program that ensured the hotel's success benefited everyone who contributed to it. Miss Santos Wellington, her assistant, David Kim, knocked on the office door. "The reporters from Chicago Business Magazine are here for the interview." Maria straightened her jacket and checked her appearance in the mirror Henry had kept in his office. The interview was for a cover story about her remarkable rise from waitress to hotel owner, a story that had fascinated Chicago's business community and made her something of a local celebrity. As she walked to the conference room where the journalists waited, Maria reflected on how different her life was from what she'd imagined 5 years earlier. She'd never married, though she'd had several relationships over the years. Her focus had been consumed by learning the business and proving herself worthy of the trust Henry had placed in her. Miss Santos Wellington, the lead reporter, Amanda Reed, stood as Maria entered the room. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. Our readers are fascinated by your story, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to feature you on our cover. The interview covered familiar territory: the night she'd helped Henry home, their unlikely friendship, and the incredible inheritance that had transformed her life. But Amanda Reed asked thoughtful questions that went beyond the fairy tale aspects of the story. Some people might say you were simply in the right place at the right time, Amanda observed. How do you respond to suggestions that your success was primarily due to luck? Maria had been asked this question many times over the years, and her answer had evolved as she'd gained perspective on her journey. Luck certainly played a role, she replied. I was lucky that Mr. Wellington happened to be walking past my building that night. Lucky that he fell and needed help. But I think what people sometimes miss is that luck only matters if you're prepared to act on it. Hundreds of people walked past Henry that evening. I wasn't the only person who could have helped him. So what made you different? I was raised to believe that when someone needs help, you help them if you can. It's that simple. My grandfather taught me that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems inconvenient or risky. I helped Henry because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected anything in return. Amanda leaned forward, clearly intrigued. But once you realized who he was and what he was offering you, did that change your perspective? Maria considered the question carefully. In some ways, yes. Once I understood the magnitude of what Henry was proposing, I felt an enormous responsibility to prove myself worthy of his trust. But the fundamental relationship didn't change. He remained someone I cared about deeply, and I remained someone who was determined to honor the values that had brought us together in the first place. The interview continued for another hour, covering Maria's management philosophy, her plans for expanding the Wellington brand, and her thoughts on the hospitality industry's future. But the questions that interested her most were those about the human side of her story. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped Mr. Wellington that night? Amanda asked as the interview concluded. Of course, Maria replied, but I try not to spend too much time on what-ifs. The choices we make define who we become, and I'm grateful for the choice I made that night. Not just because of what it led to materially, but because it brought Henry into my life. He taught me things about business, about leadership, and about life that no amount of money could buy. After the journalist left, Maria returned to her office to review the day's reports and prepare for an evening event, a charity gala being held in the Wellington's ballroom to raise money for literacy programs in Chicago's public schools. It was exactly the kind of cause Henry would have supported, and Maria had made philanthropy a cornerstone of her business philosophy. As she reviewed the guest list for the gala, Maria's phone rang. The caller ID showed her brother Carlos, who is now a high school principal in their hometown. How's my famous sister doing? Carlos asked, his voice warm with affection and pride. Your famous sister is getting ready for a charity event, and wondering why she agreed to give a speech tonight, Maria replied with a laugh. Because you're good at it, and because you have something important to say, Carlos replied. Maria, I hope you know how proud Mom and Dad and I are of what you've accomplished. Not just the business success, but the way you've used your good fortune to help other people. It was true. In addition to the employee benefits and profit-sharing programs she'd implemented at the hotels, Maria had established the Wellington Foundation, which provided scholarships for first-generation college students and supported various charitable causes throughout Chicago. She'd also used her platform as a successful businesswoman to advocate for policies that helped working families, drawing on her own experience of financial struggle. Thanks, Carlos. That means everything to me. Have you thought any more about opening a hotel back home? Carlos asked. It was a conversation they'd had several times over the years. Actually, yes. I think it might be time to expand into smaller markets, maybe create a different kind of Wellington experience for places like our hometown. Henry always said that hospitality was about making people feel at home wherever they were. That evening, as Maria stood at the podium in the Wellington's elegant ballroom, looking out at an audience of Chicago's business and civic leaders, she thought about how far she'd traveled from her origins. The nervous young woman who had once worried about affording a $32 chicken salad was now confidently addressing a crowd of influential people about the importance of supporting education and opportunity for everyone. 5 years ago, she told the audience, I was working double shifts at a diner, trying to save enough money to maybe take a few business classes. I learned that evening that you never know when life is going to offer you an opportunity to change everything. But I also learned that opportunities are meaningless unless we have the character and preparation to seize them. She paused, looking around the room at faces that were giving her their complete attention. The man who changed my life, Henry Wellington, used to say that success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by what we contribute. Tonight, by supporting literacy programs in our public schools, all of you are contributing to someone else's opportunity to change their life. You're investing in the next generation of dreamers and achievers. The speech was well received, and the gala raised over $200,000 for the literacy programs. As Maria mingled with guests afterward, she was struck by how naturally leadership had come to her. The shy waitress who had once been intimidated by the Wellington's elegance now moved confidently through crowds of successful people, equally comfortable discussing business strategy or charitable causes. Later that night, alone in her penthouse apartment, Maria walked out onto the terrace that overlooked Lake Michigan. The city sparkled below her, and she could see the lights of other hotels and restaurants throughout downtown Chicago. Somewhere out, there were people working double shifts, people struggling to make ends meet, people dreaming of better lives, people like she used to be. She thought about Henry, as she did every evening, and imagined what he would think of how she was using the gift he'd given her. She believed he would be proud, not just of the business success, but of how she'd remained true to the values that had brought them together. Maria's phone buzzed with a text message from Jennifer Morrison, who remained as the general manager of the flagship Wellington. Beautiful speech tonight. Henry would be so proud of who you've become. As Maria prepared for bed, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. The story that had begun with a simple act of kindness had evolved into something that touched hundreds of lives. The employees of the Wellington hotels, the guests who experienced their hospitality, the scholarship recipients who benefited from the foundation, and the countless other people whose lives have been improved by the ripple effects of one elderly man's gratitude. The next morning, Maria woke early and walked through the quiet lobby of the Wellington Chicago, as she did every day. She liked to see the hotel when it was peaceful, before the day's activity began in earnest. As she stood in the same spot where Henry had been confused and disoriented that November night so many years before, she marveled at the chain of events that had led her to this moment. Charles, now the head concierge, but still the same kind man who had greeted her that first night, arrived for his shift and waved warmly. "Good morning, Miss Santos Wellington. Beautiful day ahead, isn't it?" "Yes, Charles, it is," Maria replied, and she meant it in every possible way. At 10 o'clock that morning, Maria had a meeting scheduled with a group of investors interested in helping her expand the Wellington brand internationally. At lunch, she would meet with the architect designing the new Wellington location in her hometown. In the afternoon, she would review applications for the foundation's next round of scholarships. It was a full schedule, but every item on it represented an opportunity to extend the legacy that Henry had entrusted to her. The story that had begun with helping a stranger home had become a story about creating homes away from home for thousands of people, about building a business that valued both profit and people, and about using good fortune to create more good fortune for others. As Maria prepared for her day, she carried with her the knowledge that kindness, once extended, never truly ends. It multiplies, evolves, and finds new expressions in ways we can never predict. The simple decision to help an elderly man who had fallen outside her building had not just changed her life. It had created a legacy that would continue to touch lives for generations to come. The Wellington hotels would endure, the foundation would continue its work, and somewhere in Chicago, there might be another young person working double shifts and dreaming of a better future, never imagining that their own moment of unexpected opportunity might be just around the corner, waiting to transform their life in ways they could never anticipate. Maria Santos Wellington, former waitress and current owner of a hotel empire, walked confidently toward whatever the future might hold, secure in the knowledge that the best stories always begin with someone deciding to do the right thing, regardless of what they might receive in return.